I don't know how many of you have met a professional scam artist, but it changes you. I was 17 years old attending this dumpster fire public school that I swear made kids stupider. My school had no lockers because it was outdoors, you couldn't use the bathroom without someone smoking weed in your face, and you couldn't call for help because security was higher than the kids. But what I hated most about this school was the location. Hawaii. That's right, I was raised in Hawaii. Hopefully that explains why my face and my voice don't match up. But I hate telling people this because they're always like, oh my god, you grew up in paradise. No bitch, it was miserable. In my school of 3,000 people, I didn't know a single other person interested in coding. That's why I had such high hopes when my school finally announced its first computer science class. I honestly don't know what I was expecting. I was 17, I still had faith in humanity. You know the phrase, shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars? Yeah, it's bullshit. I shot for the moon and landed amongst some dude with nipple piercings. True story, his name was Mr. Clay, and he was supposed to be the school's driver's ed teacher, but then he got a speeding ticket, and now for some odd reason, he was my computer science teacher, which wouldn't be a problem except he didn't teach or know any computer science. But before I continue, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. My computer science teacher was crazy, but not as crazy as some people on the internet. That's why I never surf the web without a VPN. Surfshark VPN is easy to use and fast as it always finds the fastest speed. It has tons of features, it's easy to install, and you can run it on unlimited devices. I like this VPN because as someone who's moved 6 times within the last year, I have dealt with sites that discriminate ticket prices based on location. But with Surfshark VPN, I can just choose my location and bypass all that slimy stuff. The same way Surfshark VPN lets me change my location to Japan so I can watch the classic new school whodunit, Knives Out, on Netflix. Great movie. Surfshark will keep your data secure, protect your IP, and never log your activity. And if you don't like it, don't worry, it also has a 30-day money-back guarantee. So get Surfshark VPN at surfshark.deals/trendblack and enter promo code TRENDBLACK for 83% off and 3 extra months for free. He just uploaded someone's course to his website and told us to finish it by the end of the year. But the moment I knew he couldn't code was when I visited his website. I thought I typed the wrong URL and ended up on a virus site. Not only did Mr. Clay cumulatively teach 0 lessons, but he also ignored every single person who tried to get help or ask questions because he told us that he was teaching us the valuable skill of figuring shit out. Which just sounds like some lazy cop-out from work, because it is, but I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I don't want you to think I'm saying Mr. Clay was lazy or that he didn't work. Mr. Clay worked. He just didn't do his job. Like, does that make sense? Mr. Clay was like an entrepreneur who, instead of renting office space, just swindled one from my school. Except most offices don't pay you a full-time salary while you build your real estate empire. Most kids despise Mr. Clay, which makes sense because, you know, neglect. But I, on the other hand, was fascinated by how little his life made sense. I would talk to him whenever I had the chance, so eventually we got pretty close. The first thing I noticed about Mr. Clay was that he had really big dreams. And I don't mean big dreams like, aw, good luck. I mean big dreams like, that's not happening. Like when I asked him why he became a computer science teacher, he told me it was because it was a part of his plan to get a position at our state's Board of Education. The Board of Education, if you didn't know, is a powerful group of people who decide laws for all schools in our state. Mr. Clay is a severely underqualified high school teacher with nipple piercings. The second thing I noticed about Mr. Clay was that he was very unorthodox in the way that he thought. Like one day I asked him how to go about joining extracurriculars because I was trying to garner enough scholarships to afford living in Hawaii. Mr. Clay didn't even lower his voice when he suggested, just start some bullshit club and appoint yourself the president. I thought, holy shit, maybe he does belong in politics. He even offered to be the club advisor, but I told him I wasn't sure. Because in my mind, this was the kind of idea that you think will get you into Harvard, but it actually gets you into prison. But thankfully, he settled my doubts with a very logical train of thought. Just kidding. He looked at me and said, listen kid, you won't get ahead in life acting like a bitch. And the worst part is, it worked. I was fucking sold. So I gathered my friends, I filled out some paperwork, and I gave birth to the App Club, an exclusive and chartered organization where we scheduled meetings and didn't attend them. Which went great for about 3 weeks until Mr. Clay randomly signed us up for a hackathon. I was annoyed because I thought the whole point was we were doing nothing. This sounded like something, but I wasn't nearly as annoyed as the school was with Mr. Clay's idea of a field trip. I mean, this guy just did not give a fuck. School approval? None. Paperwork? None. School bus? He drove us there in his Jeep. I later found out from my classmates that he didn't even get a substitute teacher. But somehow, as is always the case with Mr. Clay, it all worked out. The day of the hackathon, I was freaking out because we show up and it's 9 rich private schools, and then us. Keep in mind, no one else on my team even codes. Thankfully, we were in the least talented state in America, and somehow I carried us to 2nd place. And that changed everything. I know, hold your applause. First of all, it was really good publicity for our school, probably the only reason they didn't fire Mr. Clay. And second of all, it must have flipped a switch in Mr. Clay's head, because right after that, we started going on a field trip almost every single week. A competition here, a competition there. Within a few months, we were giving talks at elementary schools and developing an app for a mental health hospital. On the outside, we seemed like the perfect group of smart, diverse, and passionate kids on a mission to save Hawaii. But deep down, we knew it was all bullshit. It wasn't about elementary school kids, it wasn't about mental health patients, it wasn't even about Hawaii. Each and every single event was just an opportunity for Mr. Clay to sell himself. See, Mr. Clay didn't know the difference between loops and recursion, but he was a master at 2 things: leverage and networking. He took us to events to make more connections, and then he used those connections to get us into more events. I initially didn't understand why Mr. Clay offered to be our club advisor, but I caught on pretty fast. It's quite genius actually. He knew that a group of kids would get more attention than he ever could, so he created this image for us. We were his ticket to something. I didn't know what, and I honestly didn't really care, because along the way I was building my own resume too. Like throughout the year, I used every single one of these events in my scholarship essays, and eventually I had enough to afford to leave Hawaii. So I passed the club presidency onto an underclassman and got ready to graduate. But not before Mr. Clay could take us on one last field trip. And not just any field trip, no. This was the biggest one yet, the state capitol. Apparently there was a bill to push computer science into public schools, and he wanted us to lobby it. So we lobbied it, and I mean we lobbied the fuck out of it. Mostly because it was our last day, so we wanted to go all out, and basically we got on our knees and just gave head to a bunch of politicians. The final step in this was giving testimony. So basically, one by one, we each go up to a podium and share our story about how computer science changed our lives. It almost brought a tear to my eye. Like, these stories were so beautiful. Completely made up, but still so beautiful. And at that final moment, I thought, we may have been a fake club, but we made a real difference. Or at least the local newspaper thought so when they wrote a piece on us, the award-winning kids changing the world with their undying passion for computer science, which in hindsight is hilarious because we all go off to college and none of them even majored in it. So I go off to college and find out the bill that we lobbied was passed when I see a picture on Facebook of the bill signing. Can you guess who stood next to the governor? Yeah. But it wasn't until a year later, after finishing my freshman year at Arizona State, that I'm finally able to go home and visit my high school, which was really fun. I saw the app club, which, to my surprise, was thriving under the new leadership. I saw all my old teachers who, to nobody's surprise, was still miserable. But the one person I couldn't find was Mr. Clay. Turns out, he got a new job at the Board of Education. Damn. Ever since that day, I've been living by the wise words. You won't get ahead in life acting like a bitch.